My son draws the same person in every picture. Yesterday, that person knocked on our door. Oliver started drawing her when he was 4 years old. Always the same woman. Tall, thin, with long black hair covering most of her face. She stood in the background of every picture he made. Behind the dinosaurs, behind our house, behind his stick figure family. Always watching. Always there. My wife Melissa thought it was an imaginary friend phase. Kids develop attachments to fictional characters all the time. But something about the way Oliver drew her made my stomach turn. He never drew her smiling or interacting with the other figures. She just stood there, perfectly still, partially hidden behind trees or furniture or clouds, like she was waiting for something. Oliver is 9 now. He's never stopped drawing her. We have hundreds of pictures, maybe thousands, stacked in boxes in our basement because Melissa couldn't bring herself to throw them away. Every birthday card he makes, every school art project, every random doodle on a restaurant napkin, there she is. Sometimes small in the corner, sometimes taking up half the page, but always the same woman with the same posture, always partially obscured. The first time I really noticed the pattern was during his 5th birthday party. Oliver was opening presents, surrounded by family and friends, and his grandmother gave him a set of fancy-colored pencils. He immediately opened them and started drawing on the back of a pizza box. Within 2 minutes, he'd sketched our backyard with perfect detail, the swing set, the fence, the neighbor's tree. And standing behind the swing, barely visible between the chains, was the woman. I asked Oliver who she was. He didn't look up from his drawing, just said, "The waiting lady." His voice was completely casual, like he was naming a type of bird or a character from a TV show. When I pressed him about where he'd seen her, he shrugged. "She's always there. In my room at night, in the backyard, at school. She just waits." Then he went back to playing with his new toys like he hadn't just described a stalker. Melissa scheduled an appointment with a child psychologist, Dr. Rita Whitmore, who specialized in childhood anxiety and obsessive behaviors. We brought Oliver in the following week with a folder full of his drawings. Dr. Whitmore spread them across her desk, studying each one carefully. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but I saw her hand pause on one particular drawing. It showed our living room from Oliver's perspective on the couch, and the woman was standing in our hallway, just beyond the kitchen doorway. The detail was disturbing. Oliver had drawn the exact pattern of our hallway wallpaper. Dr. Whitmore explained that children often create consistent imaginary companions as a way to process complex emotions or feel less alone. The fact that Oliver's companion was always in the background suggested he might be experiencing separation anxiety or fear of abandonment. She recommended weekly play therapy sessions to explore what the waiting lady represented in Oliver's emotional landscape. It made perfect sense. Logical, scientific, treatable, except the drawings got more detailed. By age 6, Oliver was drawing the woman with specific clothing, a long gray dress with buttons down the front, bare feet even in his winter scene drawings, hands that hung too long at her sides, fingers that seemed to have too many joints, and her hair, always covering her face, but occasionally you could see a hint of something behind it. Not eyes exactly, but dark spaces where eyes should be. The play therapy sessions revealed nothing useful. Dr. Whitmore said Oliver was a well-adjusted, emotionally healthy child with no signs of trauma or distress. He talked freely about the waiting lady, describing her the way other kids might describe a pet. She was just part of his world, always present, never threatening. When Dr. Whitmore asked if the waiting lady ever spoke to him, Oliver said no. She just waited. That was all she did. During 2nd grade, Oliver's teacher, Mrs. Patricia Vaughn, called us in for a conference. She'd noticed that Oliver drew the same figure in every assignment that involved illustration. Book reports, science diagrams, math story problems. The woman was always there, tucked into corners or standing in backgrounds. Mrs. Vaughn said it wasn't concerning from a behavioral standpoint. Oliver was polite and focused and did excellent work, but she wondered if we were aware of the obsessive pattern. I showed Mrs. Vaughn the collection of drawings we'd accumulated, hundreds of pictures spanning 3 years, all featuring the same figure. She went pale. "Has anyone else ever seen this woman?" she asked carefully. "Besides in Oliver's drawings, I mean?" Neither Melissa nor I had. Mrs. Vaughn suggested we might want to consult with someone who specialized in neurological issues. Perhaps Oliver was experiencing visual hallucinations that needed medical intervention. We took Oliver to Dr. Benjamin Cross, a pediatric neurologist at the University Hospital. Full workup, MRI, EEG, vision tests, cognitive assessments. Everything came back completely normal. Dr. Cross said Oliver's brain showed no signs of abnormality, no seizure activity, no tumors, no chemical imbalances. Whatever Oliver was seeing or imagining, it wasn't neurological. He suggested we continue with the psychological approach, maybe increase the therapy frequency. When Oliver turned 7, something changed. He started talking about how the waiting lady was getting closer. Not physically closer in his drawings, she still maintained the same distance in the background, but closer in some way he couldn't articulate. "She's almost ready," he told us one night at dinner. Almost time for her to stop waiting. When we asked what she was waiting for, he said he didn't know yet, but he would. Soon. Melissa found a drawing in Oliver's room that he hadn't shown us. It was different from the others. Instead of a scene with the woman in the background, this was just her, filling the entire page, drawn in careful detail. The long gray dress, the bare feet, the hands with too many joints, and for the first time her hair was pulled slightly to the side. Behind it, where her face should be, Oliver had drawn a blank oval. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth emptiness. At the bottom of the page, he'd written in careful letters, "She needs a face." I confronted Oliver about the drawing that evening. He was building a Lego spaceship, completely absorbed in snapping pieces together. When I showed him the picture, he glanced at it and nodded. Yeah, she doesn't have a face yet. That's what she's waiting for. I asked him what he meant, and he explained it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She's not finished yet. That's why she waits. When she's finished, she'll come get me and we'll go. The casual way he said, "Come get me," made my blood run cold. I asked where they would go, and Oliver shrugged. Wherever people go when they're finished here. She needs me to finish her, and then I go with her. That's how it works. He returned to his Lego spaceship, like he'd just explained basic arithmetic. Melissa, who'd been listening from the doorway, started crying. Oliver looked up, confused by her reaction. "It's okay, Mom. Everyone has a waiting lady. You just can't see yours yet." We called Dr. Whitmore immediately, emergency session. She cleared her schedule and saw us that evening. Oliver brought his Lego spaceship and worked on it while Melissa and I explained what he'd said. Dr. Whitmore's assessment was that Oliver had developed a more elaborate narrative around his imaginary companion, possibly incorporating concepts of death or transition he'd heard at school or seen in media. She didn't think he was suicidal or in danger, just processing abstract concepts through his established symbolic figure. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Oliver had said. Everyone has a waiting lady. I got up around 2 a.m. and went downstairs to the basement where we kept all his drawings, spread them out across the floor, hundreds of pictures spanning 5 years. And I started to notice something I'd never seen before, the woman's position relative to Oliver's stick figure self. In his earliest drawings, she was very far away, barely visible at the edges of the page. In each subsequent picture, she was slightly closer. Not obviously closer, but measurably so. I spent 3 hours that night organizing the drawings chronologically and measuring the distance between Oliver's figure and the woman. It was a consistent progression. She was getting closer at a steady rate. If the pattern continued, by my calculations, she would reach Oliver's position in approximately 2 years, right around his 9th birthday. I showed Melissa my findings in the morning, and she thought I was losing my mind. They're children's drawings, David. You're measuring stick figures with a ruler. This is insane. Maybe it was. Probably it was. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, that Oliver was showing us something real through his art, something none of us understood. I started documenting everything. Every drawing, every comment Oliver made about the waiting lady, every detail he added to her appearance. I took photos, kept a dated journal, backed everything up to the cloud. Melissa thought the obsession was unhealthy, but she didn't stop me. 3rd grade started, and Oliver's new teacher, Mr. Thomas Brennan, called within the first week. "I need to ask you about something unusual," he said carefully. Oliver drew a picture during free time today. It showed our classroom with remarkable accuracy, every desk in the right position, the bookshelf, the windows, all correct. But there was a woman standing in the closet. When I asked him about it, he said that's where the waiting lady stands during school, in the supply closet. I drove to the school immediately. Mr. Brennan showed me the drawing. It was exactly as he'd described. The classroom was rendered in incredible detail for an 8-year-old's work. And there, in the small closet at the back of the room, partially visible between hanging coats, was the familiar figure. "Has anyone checked the closet?" I asked. Mr. Brennan looked uncomfortable. "I did. There's nothing there. Just supplies and winter coats. But David, the detail in this drawing, Oliver perfectly captured the view from his desk, including things he couldn't possibly see from that angle. The clock above the door, the posters behind him. It's like he drew the room from multiple viewpoints simultaneously. That night, Oliver drew a picture at the dinner table while waiting for his food. Our kitchen, viewed from his seat at the table, with Melissa and me in our usual positions. And standing behind me, so close she could have been touching my shoulder, was the waiting lady. I asked Oliver if she was really that close, if she was in the room with us right now. He looked up from his drawing, glanced over my shoulder, and nodded. "Yeah, she's right behind you. She's always close to at least one of us now, taking turns watching." I spun around. Nothing there, just our kitchen wall with its calendar and shopping list. But Oliver was calmly coloring in the woman's gray dress, adding careful shading to suggest depth and dimension. "Can you see her right now?" I asked, my voice shaking. Oliver nodded without looking up. "She's still there. She's looking at you. Well, not looking exactly, since she doesn't have eyes yet, but pointing her face at you." He said it so casually, like he was describing a mildly interesting cloud formation. Melissa took Oliver to a different psychologist, Dr. Hannah Fitzgerald, who specialized in childhood hallucinations and early-onset schizophrenia. 3 two-hour sessions, extensive testing, family history analysis. Dr. Fitzgerald's conclusion was frustrating. Oliver showed no signs of psychosis or thought disorder. He didn't hear voices, didn't have delusions, didn't exhibit any of the typical markers of serious mental illness. The waiting lady was more like a persistent visual phenomenon, similar to how some children have eidetic imagery or enhanced pattern recognition. Some children, Dr. Fitzgerald explained, have a neurological quirk that allows them to visualize abstract concepts or internal states as external figures. It's not pathological, just unusual. Oliver has created a visual representation of something, perhaps mortality awareness or temporal progression, and his brain renders it as this consistent figure. He's not hallucinating in the clinical sense. He's visualizing a conceptual framework. That explanation satisfied Melissa, but it didn't explain why Oliver's drawings showed the woman in specific locations he couldn't see from his vantage point. It didn't explain the increasing detail, or the way Oliver described her as almost ready, or his certainty that everyone has a waiting lady. And it definitely didn't explain what happened next. Oliver's 9th birthday was on a Saturday in November. We'd planned a small party, just family, after the previous year's gathering had been awkward with Oliver drawing the waiting lady throughout the event, including one disturbing picture showing her standing behind the birthday cake. This year, we'd decided to keep it simple. Just us, Melissa's sister Rachel, and my parents. 5 people, minimal stress. The morning of his birthday, I found Oliver in his room before dawn, sitting at his desk with a fresh piece of paper and his art supplies spread around him. He was drawing with intense focus, his hand moving in careful, deliberate strokes. I watched from the doorway as the image took shape. Our front door, viewed from outside the house, with perfect perspective and detail. He'd drawn the address numbers, the doorbell, the small crack in the 3rd porch step, everything exact. And standing on the porch, facing the door, was the waiting lady. "What are you drawing, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Oliver didn't look up. "Today's the day. She's finished waiting. This is where she'll be at 10:47 a.m. That's when I was born. She'll knock on the door and it'll be time." He said it with absolute certainty. No fear or excitement, just stating a fact. "Time for what?" I asked. Oliver finally looked at me, his 9-year-old face serious and calm. "Time to go with her. I've been getting ready my whole life. The drawings were practice, helping her become more real. Now she's ready, and I'm ready." I called Melissa, and we had an emergency family conference while Oliver ate his birthday pancakes, completely unfazed. We decided to leave the house for the day, take Oliver to the Science Museum downtown, be anywhere except home at 10:47 a.m. If Oliver had fixated on that specific time and place, we'd remove the possibility. Simple solution, rational plan. Except Oliver refused to leave. He started crying, not the tantrum kind, but deep, scared sobs, saying we didn't understand. If we weren't here when she came, she'd just wait longer, and it would be worse. He'd be 10 or 11 or 12, and the waiting would have been for nothing. "She's been patient for 9 years. He said through tears. "We can't make her wait longer. That's not how it works. Please, Dad. Please just let it happen." The desperation in his voice broke something in me. This wasn't a game or an attention-seeking behavior. Oliver genuinely believed a woman from his drawings was coming for him, and his terror wasn't of her arrival, but of its delay. Melissa wanted to take him to the emergency room, get him admitted for psychiatric evaluation. But something in my gut, some instinct I couldn't name, told me Oliver was right, that we needed to be home at 10:47 a.m. So we stayed. Made a show of birthday preparations while watching the clock. My parents arrived at 9, confused by the tension. Rachel showed up at 9:30 with presents and a cheerful smile that faded when she saw our faces. We explained nothing, just said Oliver was having a difficult morning. We'd open presents after he felt better. At 10:30, Oliver positioned himself on the couch facing the front door. He had a new drawing in his lap, working on final details. The woman on our porch, her hand raised to knock. 10:45 a.m. My hands were shaking. Melissa was crying quietly in the kitchen. My father kept asking what was wrong, but I couldn't form words to explain. Rachel sat next to Oliver, trying to distract him with a story about her cat, but Oliver wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the door, waiting. I'd positioned myself between Oliver and the front entrance, though I had no idea what I was protecting him from or how. 10:46 a.m. Oliver stood up, walked to the door, and pressed his small hand against the wood. "She's here," he whispered. "I can feel her on the other side. She's raising her hand. Almost time." I wanted to grab him, pull him away, lock him in his room, but I was frozen. Every rational part of my brain said this was delusion, mass hysteria, a family falling apart under the weight of a child's persistent fantasy, but my body wouldn't move. 10:47 a.m. Someone knocked on our door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, perfectly spaced. The sound seemed to echo through the entire house, through my skull, through reality itself. Everyone heard it. My father's face went white. Rachel gasped. Melissa made a sound like a wounded animal. Oliver turned to look at me, his expression peaceful, resigned. "See? I told you. She's always been real. You just couldn't see her yet." I didn't move toward the door. Couldn't. Wouldn't. The seconds stretched out, feeling like hours. Another 3 knocks, same rhythm, same deliberate spacing, patient, expected. Oliver reached for the doorknob and I finally found my voice. No, it came out as a whisper, then stronger. No, you're not opening that door, you're not going anywhere. Oliver looked at me with such sadness. Dad, it doesn't matter if you open it or not. She's not going away. She waited 9 years. She'll wait 9 more if she has to. But then it'll be worse. I'll be older and more scared, and it'll hurt more. Please just let me go. This is what I'm for. This is why I've been drawing her, helping her become real enough to cross over. Cross over from where? My father's voice, sharp and demanding. Oliver turned to his grandfather. From the place where she's been waiting. The same place we all come from before we're born. She's been stuck there since her person here died, before she could finish waiting. I'm her second chance. She needs me to replace him so she can finally stop waiting and become finished. The logic was insane. The explanation, impossible. But 3 more knocks came at the door, and I felt something shift in the air pressure, like a storm building inside our house. My mother started praying, words tumbling out in desperate confusion. Rachel had pulled out her phone, was trying to call 911, but her hands were shaking too hard to dial. Melissa was sliding down the kitchen wall, her face buried in her hands. I made a decision. Walked to the door, every muscle screaming at me to run the other way. Put my hand on the knob, feeling it ice cold under my palm. Looked back at Oliver, who nodded encouragement, and opened the door. She stood on our porch exactly as Oliver had drawn her. Tall, thin, the gray dress with buttons down the front, bare feet on the November cold wood, hands hanging with too many joints visible. Her black hair fell over her face, moving slightly in a wind I couldn't feel. Behind the hair, darkness. Not the darkness of shadow, but of absence, of void. Where her face should have been, there was simply nothing. We stared at each other, this impossible thing and me. Behind me, I heard my mother screaming, my father shouting, Rachel sobbing, but it all sounded distant, muted, like I was underwater. The woman, the entity, whatever she was, tilted her head. Slowly, deliberately, she raised one hand and pointed past me, at Oliver. No, I said again, stronger this time. You can't have him. I don't care what he thinks he's for. I don't care how long you've waited. He's 9 years old. He's my son. And you're not taking him anywhere. My voice cracked on the last word, but I didn't move from the doorway. The thing that shouldn't exist tilted its head the other way, almost curious. Then it reached up with both hands and pulled the hair away from where its face should have been. The darkness underneath wasn't empty. It was full of something that hurt to look at directly. Something that made my eyes water and my mind try to reject what it was seeing. Shapes that weren't shapes. Movements that went directions that didn't exist. And in the center of it all, a desperate, pleading hunger. She needed Oliver. Not wanted, needed. I could feel the desperation radiating off her like heat. 9 years of waiting, of slowly becoming real enough to cross the threshold from wherever she'd been trapped. Oliver had been drawing her into existence, giving her form and detail and substance through thousands of pictures. And now she was here, finally real enough to touch our world, and I was standing between her and her purpose. Oliver pushed past me before I could stop him, walked right up to her, this thing that was and wasn't a woman, and looked up at where her face should be. I'm ready, he said calmly. I finished making you real. Now we can go. He held out his small hand toward her 2 long fingers. Oliver, get back in this house right now. Melissa's voice, raw with terror. But Oliver didn't move. The woman's hand hovered over his, not quite touching, waiting, even now, for something. Permission, maybe. Final acceptance. I wanted to grab Oliver, pull him back, slam the door, and never let him near a drawing tool again. But something stopped me. Why him? I asked the thing on my porch. Why does it have to be Oliver? She couldn't answer, had no mouth to speak with, but I felt the response anyway. Not words, but concepts appearing in my mind. Because he could see me. Because he was born the same moment my first person died. Because reality is thinner at the edges, and he exists at an edge. Because waiting requires someone on both sides, and he's been my anchor here while I've been his reminder there. Because it's not random and it's not cruel, it's just how the pattern works. What happens if he goes with you? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Again, not words, but impressions. He becomes what I was, takes my place waiting. I become finished, move forward to whatever comes after waiting. The cycle continues because cycles always continue. Someone must wait so others can become ready. It's older than language, older than humans, older than time being measured. And if he doesn't go, the woman's entire form flickered, like bad television reception. The impression came stronger this time, almost angry. I wait longer, become less real, eventually fade back to where I've been, but the connection remains. Oliver will always know I'm waiting, will see me in corners of his vision, will draw me until his hands can't hold pencils. The waiting will never end, will stretch across his entire life, will pass to his children if he has them. Because once you're seen, once you're drawn into partial reality, the waiting becomes eternal unless completed. I looked at my 9-year-old son, standing calmly on our porch, holding hands with an impossible thing. His face was peaceful in a way I'd never seen before, like he'd been carrying a weight his entire life and was finally about to set it down. "Is this really what you want?" I asked him, my voice breaking. "Do you understand what you're agreeing to?" Oliver smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. "Dad, I've known since before I could talk. This isn't scary. This is just what I'm for. Like how flowers are for blooming and rivers are for flowing. I'm for waiting. Someone has to be, or nothing moves forward. She's been doing it for so long, Dad. Longer than there have been people. She needs to rest." He squeezed the woman's hand, and where they touched, reality seemed to blur and shift. "How long?" I asked him. "How long will you have to wait?" Oliver shrugged, unconcerned. "However long it takes. Maybe 9 years, maybe 90. However long until someone else is born at the same moment I'm finished. It's not bad, Dad. It's just waiting. And I'll get to see so many things while I wait. All the edges of reality, all the thin places, all the almost moments. It's actually kind of interesting." Melissa pushed past me, grabbed Oliver's free hand, trying to pull him back. "You're 9 years old. You don't get to make this choice. You don't understand what you're giving up." But Oliver held firm, didn't budge. "I understand, Mom. I've understood my whole life. You taught me how to read and ride a bike and be kind to people. You did everything right. This isn't your fault. This is just what I am." The woman, the waiting lady, turned her faceless head toward Melissa, and somehow, without words or features, I felt compassion radiating from her. She understood, had probably stood on countless doorsteps over eons, watching countless parents try to hold on to children who served purposes beyond family. The grief was ancient, universal, unchangeable. Someone always has to wait. "Can we have a minute?" I asked the woman. "Just 1 minute to say goodbye?" She nodded, released Oliver's hand, and stepped back slightly. Still on our porch, still impossibly real, but giving us space. I knelt down in front of Oliver, Melissa beside me, both of us holding our son who we'd raised and loved and failed to protect from something we couldn't understand. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry we couldn't figure this out, couldn't fix it, couldn't save you from this." Oliver hugged me tightly. "There's nothing to save me from, Dad. This isn't a bad thing. It's just my thing, like how some people are musicians or doctors or teachers. I'm a waiter. I wait between worlds so others can cross. It's important work." We held him for that minute, memorizing the feel of his small body, his breathing, his heartbeat. Melissa was sobbing into his shoulder. My parents and Rachel stood in the doorway, witnessing something that would never make sense, never be explainable, never fit into their understanding of reality. When the minute ended, Oliver pulled back, kissed both our cheeks, and turned toward the waiting lady. "I'm ready now," he said firmly. She extended her hand again, and this time Oliver took it without hesitation. The moment their fingers connected fully, the world did something I lack words to describe. Reality folded, or unfolded, or turned inside out. The woman and Oliver began to fade, not disappearing but becoming less there. Translucent first, then transparent, then just an outline of where they'd been. "Wait!" I shouted, reaching for Oliver. "How do we know you're okay? How do we know this isn't just dying? How do we—" Oliver's voice came from somewhere that wasn't quite our porch anymore. "You'll know because you'll see me, Dad. I'll be in the background of things, waiting, watching. Draw me sometimes. It helps. It makes the waiting less lonely. And when it's your turn to cross, I'll be there to help you. That's what waiters do." Then they were gone. Just empty porch boards and morning sunlight and a family destroyed by something impossible. Melissa collapsed. My mother was still praying, words having lost all meaning. My father sat down heavily on the couch, his face gray. Rachel stood frozen, phone still in her hand, 911 finally connected and asking what our emergency was. How could we explain? The police came because Rachel had managed to say something about a kidnapping before her voice gave out. We tried to explain, tried to describe what had happened. They looked at us like we were insane or high or experiencing collective psychosis. They searched the house, the neighborhood, put out an Amber Alert for Oliver. But there was nothing to find. No signs of struggle, no evidence of abduction, no proof of anything except a family falling apart. Over the next weeks, detectives interviewed us repeatedly. Child Protective Services investigated whether we'd harmed Oliver ourselves and created an elaborate story to cover it. Our families distanced themselves, unable to cope with what they'd witnessed. Melissa and I were investigated for murder, for child abuse, for conspiracy. But there was no body, no evidence, no logical explanation for a 9-year-old vanishing from his own porch in front of 6 witnesses. Eventually, they closed the case as an unexplained disappearance. Cold case files. Unsolved mystery. The official story became that Oliver had run away, and we'd experienced shared delusion to cope with our guilt over poor parenting. Some people believed we'd killed him and hidden the body. Others thought we'd sold him to traffickers and made up the supernatural story. No one believed the truth, because the truth was impossible. I went to the basement and pulled out all of Oliver's drawings. Thousands of pictures spanning 9 years, every single one featuring the waiting lady in the background. I organized them chronologically again, and this time I saw the full pattern. She'd been becoming more real with each picture, more detailed, more substantial. Oliver had been drawing her into enough existence to cross from wherever she'd been trapped. His art had been a 9-year working, a spell written in crayons and colored pencils. 3 months after Oliver disappeared, I started seeing her, not the woman, but Oliver, in backgrounds, standing behind people at the grocery store, barely visible, in reflections of windows, at the edges of photographs, always distant, always watching, always waiting, just like he'd drawn the woman for 9 years. And I understood that somewhere, in whatever space exists between living and crossing, my son was doing his work, waiting so others could finish. I started drawing him, kept art supplies by my bed, and would wake up at 3 a.m. with the need to sketch Oliver standing in various backgrounds, behind buildings, in parks, at the edges of rooms. And sometimes, when I drew him, I could feel him noticing, feel his attention briefly focus on me before returning to his waiting. The drawings helped, made the absence slightly less unbearable, made me feel like I was supporting his work the way he'd supported the waiting ladies. Melissa couldn't cope. She left me after 6 months, moved across the country to live with her mother, cut off all contact. She blamed me for opening the door, for not physically restraining Oliver, for allowing the impossible to happen. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should have fought harder, but in my gut, I knew Oliver would have found a way. Once you're seen by something that waits, once you've drawn it into enough reality to knock on your door, the pattern has to complete. Fighting just prolongs the waiting. A year after Oliver left, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a drawing, Oliver's style, but more refined, more skilled than a 9-year-old could manage. It showed our old house from the street view, with me standing in the living room window, and behind me, barely visible in the room's darkness, was Oliver, waiting, watching, present in the way waiters are present. On the back, he'd written, "I'm okay, Dad. The waiting isn't lonely anymore. I see so much from here. I'm learning how reality holds itself together. Love you." Oh, I framed it, hung it above my desk in my new apartment, the one I moved to after Melissa took our house in the divorce. I look at it every day and wonder if Oliver can see me looking. If somewhere in the space between worlds, my 9-year-old son is aware of his father's grief and trying to comfort me with drawings sent through impossible means. 2 years after Oliver left, I started getting calls from other parents whose children drew obsessive pictures of the same figure over and over. Sometimes it was a man, sometimes a woman, sometimes something that didn't quite fit either category. But always the same pattern, a figure waiting in backgrounds, getting more detailed over time, moving closer in each successive drawing, and the parents had no idea what to do. I started a support group, online first, then in person when I found enough local families. We called it Parents of Waiters, though most outsiders thought we meant restaurant workers. We shared our children's drawings, compared patterns, tried to predict when the knocking would come. And when it did come, when the impossible showed up at another family's door, we were there. Not to prevent it, we'd all learned you can't prevent what waiters are for, but to witness, to validate, to help families understand they weren't insane. The group grew. Dozens of families, then hundreds. We documented everything, kept databases of drawings, tracked patterns across continents. We discovered the waiting occurs in every culture, has been happening since humans started making art. Cave paintings show figures in backgrounds, watching, waiting. Medieval manuscripts have them in margins. Modern photographs capture them at the edges, written off as glitches or shadows. Waiters have always been there, holding reality together by existing at its edges. Some parents asked me how I coped, how I survived watching my 9-year-old walk away with an impossible thing. I told them the truth. I didn't survive it. The man I was before that November morning died on that porch. What came back into the house was something else. Someone who'd seen behind reality's curtain and couldn't unknow what he'd learned. I told them the grief never stops, but it transforms into something you can carry. Like how Oliver carried his knowledge that he was for waiting, I carry my knowledge that I'm for supporting waiters. Oliver is 13 now, or would be. Time probably works differently where he waits. I still see him in backgrounds, still draw him every few days. The drawings feel like prayers, like ways of saying, I remember you, I honor your work, I know you're still there. And sometimes, very rarely, I get drawings back. Oliver at different ages, in different places, always waiting, always watching. He looks peaceful in them, content with his purpose, in a way he never quite was here. Last week, I got a call from a terrified mother in Oregon. Her 5-year-old daughter had started drawing a man with no face, always the same figure, always in the background of her pictures. The mother had found my website, was crying into the phone, asking if there was any way to stop what was coming. I told her the truth. No, you can't stop what waiters are for, but you can understand it. You can honor it. You can be there when the knocking comes and help your daughter cross with dignity instead of fighting her purpose. She asked me the question I get most often. What kind of God creates a system where children are born to wait between worlds? I gave her the answer I've developed over 4 years of living with this knowledge. Maybe not a God at all. Maybe just reality doing what reality does, requiring bridges between states, needing beings who exist at transitions. Waiters aren't chosen by divine plan, they're born into necessity. The way some people are born with perfect pitch, or the ability to see colors others can't. It's not cruel, it's just structural. The universe needs them, so they exist. Yesterday morning at 6:23 a.m., my birthday, I heard a knock at my apartment door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, wondering if my time had come. If Oliver had been waiting for me to reach the age where I could cross to wherever he maintains his vigil. I walked to the door, hand shaking as I reached for the knob, opened it slowly. Nobody there, just an empty hallway. But on my doormat was a drawing, Oliver's style, now with the skill of a teenager. It showed my apartment hallway from outside my door, with me visible through the peephole. And behind me, standing in my living room, was Oliver, taller now, older, but unmistakably my son. Under the picture he'd written, "Not yet, Dad, not for a long time, but when it's your turn, I'll be here waiting. I'll help you cross." That's what waiters do for people they love. I'm sitting here now with that drawing in my lap, tears streaming down my face, trying to decide if it's comfort or horror. My son, frozen at 13, waiting at reality's edges for decades until I'm old enough to die and cross to wherever he maintains his position. A promise that he'll be there, that death won't be lonely, that his waiting will eventually have personal meaning beyond structural necessity. Should that make me feel better? Does it? I don't know anymore. I've spent 4 years learning to live with impossible knowledge, building a community of parents who've lost children to purposes we can't fully understand. I've drawn Oliver hundreds of times, watched him grow in my sketches even though I don't know if he actually ages where he waits. I've helped other families prepare for knocking that will come, for children who will walk away with things that shouldn't exist. And I've tried, desperately tried, to find meaning in the absence. Maybe there is no meaning. Maybe waiters simply exist because reality requires them, the same way existence requires time and space and gravity. Maybe Oliver is happy in his waiting, fulfilled by his purpose in ways I can't comprehend from this side of the threshold. Maybe one day I'll join him there and understand. Or maybe I'll die normally, cross to whatever comes after life, and never see my son again, because we'll exist in different types of after. I'm sharing this because if your child draws the same figure in every picture, you need to know what's coming. The figure will get more detailed. We'll get closer. We'll become real enough to knock. And when that knocking comes, you won't be able to stop it. You can only witness it, honor it, and try to understand that your child serves a purpose older than civilization. They're not being taken. They're going where they've always been meant to go. Oliver draws me sometimes, I think. I see pictures online, posted by people who find strange sketches in unexpected places. Pictures of a middle-aged man standing in various backgrounds, looking sad but stable. Always the same man, appearing in hundreds of drawings over years. People ask who he is, this recurring figure. Nobody knows, but I recognize myself in the sketches, rendered in my son's evolving style. He's watching me the way I watched him, drawing me into some kind of existence in his world the way he drew the waiting lady into ours. Maybe that's the real pattern. We draw each other. Parents draw children into reality through love and care and attention. Children draw parents into memory through art and recollection and continued connection. And waiters draw everyone into understanding that reality is held together by beings who choose to exist at its thinnest points, maintaining transitions so the rest of us can pass through. Check your child's drawings tonight. Look carefully at the backgrounds. See if there's a figure that appears over and over, getting more detailed with each picture. And if you find one, start preparing. Learn what you can. Join a support group. Document everything. Because one day, probably years from now, that figure will knock on your door. And your child will walk toward it with purpose and peace and understanding you can't share. And all you can do is watch and draw them afterward. And hope the waiting isn't too lonely. Oliver is out there now, at reality's edges, watching, waiting, holding something together that we need held. My 9-year-old son became something more than human because reality required it. And I'm here, drawing him, remembering him, loving him across whatever distance separates the living from the waiters. The knocking will come for someone else's family soon. Another child will walk toward their purpose. Another parent will stand on a porch watching their world end. And I'll be there if they need me, explaining what can't be explained, validating what shouldn't be possible, helping them understand that waiters are born, not made, that their child saw what others couldn't, that the waiting is real and necessary and ancient. That's my life now, drawing my absent son, supporting parents of other waiters, existing in the space between accepting impossible reality and drowning in grief. Some days are better than others. Some days I can almost convince myself Oliver is happy where he waits, fulfilled by his purpose. Other days I just see my 9-year-old walking away with something that shouldn't exist, and the pain is fresh as that November morning. But I keep drawing, keep documenting, keep helping other families prepare for knocking that will come. Because Oliver told me the drawings help, make the waiting less lonely, and if my son is out there at reality's edges, holding something together that needs held, the least I can do is draw him, Remember him. Honor his work. He was for waiting. I'm for witnessing the waiters. We all serve the purposes we're born for, whether we understand them or not. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.